Good evening and welcome to the March 12th meeting of the Beal Early Childhood Center Building Committee. First item for this evening is to review the meeting minutes of February 12th, 2019. Any observations or comments? If there isn't, could I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to accept February 12th, 2019. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, unanimous. Item 3 is to review and act on the following bill schedules and warrants. Vendor expense item, PMA Consultants invoice 04110-20 in the amount of $18,145. Lamoureux, Pagano and Associates invoice 1717-1901 for $464,845. Lamoureux, Pagano and Associates invoice 1717-1902 for $464,840. Fontaine Brothers Requisition 1 for $26,053. Comments, questions? Everything prepared accurately and truly?
Yes.
Great. All right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded to act on all four. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0. Next, item 4, we will hear the reports, review and act on the following matters. Report from the owner's project manager.
All right, we're going to start with schedule, and you folks have handout in a paperclip package. There's several handouts in there. And the first one we're going to just look at really briefly is the schedule. It's this one. You just want to flip to the second page, which is the back of the first page. Just go down to toward the end of design development. Everything else has been actualized on the schedule up into where we are right now. So if you go under design development and you go to item activity 1952, that is the review that we'll be doing tonight of the reconciled DD estimates, and that's today, and all of these other dates remain per this schedule, except there is some talk of trying to put the 60% and 90% submissions together with the estimate as opposed to delaying the estimate 21 days after the design package submissions. We're going to look into doing that by actualizing some costs for early packages, et cetera, so that we can do them together as opposed to stagger them.
What that'll do is allow Fontaine to have hard bids numbers for those two early packages at the 60% and the 90%. It'll be a little bit better information for everybody, more accurate.
And which two packages are you?
The abatement and demo and site for the first one, coming up in June, early June, and then it would be foundations and structural steel for the second package, late August.
Okay.
So, right around there.
Thank you. Any questions on that? No? All right. Thank you. Questions on the schedule? No? All right, thank you.
Okay, then the next item here is project finances. We're going to kind of break up the finances from discussing the reconciled estimates, which Walter and Sean and Dave and Frank will hit later on in the agenda. But we have the basic budget summary that you folks always get. And contract values remain the same as last month, $10,103,214. The invoices are through February. So total project invoices, costs received to date, $2,782,147. The encumbered value is the $10,106,704. That includes PMA's contract, LPA's contract, Fontaine's pre-construction services contract, and some miscellaneous district direct invoices. And so there's the project, the budget remaining is the 82. If you add the 10 million and the 82, you get to the 92,809,274, which is the project budget.
Okay, thank you.
So we have pro-pay submissions to date, the amount we've submitted, the amount of reimbursement, and as it notes on the bottom, those reimbursements are on hold until we execute a project funding agreement, which will happen once the land transaction is completed. The other item that we passed out today that we normally don't. I guess you guys saw 3011 last time when Paul was here. This is, I don't wanna call it dumbed down, but that's kind of what it is. It's just an easier to read version of the 3011, and it outlines the complete total project budget. So, we have the propay codes, the PFA, that's the budget that's gonna be in the PFA. That's the same budget that's in your project scope and budget agreement. It's not gonna change from project scope and budget to PFA. So PFA, current budget is the same, billable budget, it's the same. Then we have billed to date, and that should match the invoices cost through February on the summary, but it appears that if you look at this, we have tabs that roll up into this summary, and it looks like I'm missing one $1,500 invoice from Cogswell. So I have to figure out where my spreadsheet went off the rails and fix that.
Thank you.
But then it just shows, all the line items, what they've been completed to date. And at the bottom is the total project budget, the $92,809,274 that everybody's familiar with.
Questions?
And one other thing, this is the project funding agreement budget, and this is gonna stay here until we execute a GMP with Fontaine. We're not gonna change the construction budget value until it is what it is, when we have a GMP.
Gotcha. Any questions? No? All right. Please continue.
Pass it over to Sean for update from the architect.
Good evening. Just going to kind of give you a quick update of what we've been doing to date, what we plan on doing, and what you can expect to see from us going forward. Since we've last met, we've had a few meetings with town representatives to further refine the design of the media center, the kitchen area, ongoing email exchanges on some of the proprietary items that we're discussing later on tonight. Ongoing MEP coordination with all our consultants. We're happy to say all of our consultants have provided their designs in BIM software, which is, if you recall, early on in this process, 3D modeling. So we can start to really identify coordination and clash issues with that. As you know, we've completed the DD set. For those of you that have saw it, we have 2 volumes of drawings. We've refined the specs, upwards of 3,500 pages there. Some of you chose to just receive the specs digitally. Wise move there. But as far as other meetings that we just recently had, we met with Eversource actually yesterday. They have a large buildings incentives program that they reached out through our green engineer consultant. And that program, because the building is being served by gas, they looked at the opportunity for that. So what came out of that meeting is there's a proposal process with them that is forthcoming, and we'll present to you guys so you can kind of see the overall benefit versus the costs and the long-term savings for you guys to kind of weigh in and see if you want to participate in that large building incentives program.
And how will we get the material to arrive at that decision?
So our consultant, well, interestingly enough, it didn't necessarily need to be our green engineer consultant, but our green engineer consultant had worked with Eversource on other projects, and they usually hire a third-party company to do 3D energy modeling for the program. So what ends up happening is they provide Eversource with the proposal, and from my understanding, the cost for that service, 75% of it is funded by Eversource's program, 25% would be on the town, but there's the long-term savings of whatever rebate programs they can offer, energy savings, so it'll all be laid out in that proposal forthcoming.
Okay.
It'll be coming from you guys and your consultant.
Yes, yep.
At the next meeting?
We hope we have it wrapped up by then. I can't imagine it would take that long to pull that together. I think there might be a little back and forth between the consultant and Eversource to make sure they're in alignment with what they're looking for from them.
As soon as you have it in a workable form, it would be good if you could send it to the manager's office so that, excuse me, I'm pointing at public buildings behind you. So
We were actually at a meeting yesterday.
beautiful, so you're a step ahead of us. So just so they can complete the analysis of that, so when we have our meeting, we have the backup with good analysis and a recommendation from our own folks that dovetails hopefully with yours.
Perfect.
Thank you.
We also had our first site plan review meeting. So as you may or may not recall, we submitted our drawings in February to be on the March meeting. We received comments, we responded to those comments. The meeting went well, and we fully anticipate having final approval in our forthcoming April 4th meeting with the site plan review. It's also who has come on board since then. MSBA, as part of the contract, hires a third-party commissioning agent. Those of you that may know what the commissioning agent does or doesn't do, ultimately there's two parts to it. The commissioning agent themselves, they oversee kind of commissioning all the building MEP items, startup, material warranties, all that stuff for you guys to kind of protect your interests. So this is someone the state pays for separately. It's not through your contract. And they also hire another third-party sub-consultant that looks at the exterior envelope and energy-saving opportunities. So they've reviewed the DD documents. We have their comments, and we're required to incorporate and respond to those comments in our next submission to the state. And then lastly, we have some additional geotechnical services that are scheduled for later this month. We're looking at opportunities as much as possible to reuse soil, just really gather some more information. As we all know, the arsenic soil, kind of just the composition of the soil is facing some constraints there, and we're trying to see how much we can alleviate ourselves of some of those without having to take it off-site.
Great. Any questions for the architect? None? Okay. Thank you very much. Item 5, review and consider recommendation to the school committee of proprietary specifications.
All right, so I'll kind of tag team this with Sean. So earlier this week, and kind of late last week, I sent out an email with regards to proprietary specifications. It's just a different type of way to procure different materials for the building. Through the design process with the folks from the town, with the school departments, and LPA and their consultants, there have been a number of items that have been determined that would be beneficial for the town of Shrewsbury to be procured under a proprietary specification. These items have been accounted for in the project budget. The only one specifically that as named might not have been would be the security system, although we have a security system called out in the specifications right now. The other ones were identified and have been bid out in the estimates, which we'll talk about after. So there are a list of recommendations from Siemens for the flushometers. There is also one from LPA on the Sargent hardware lock sets. And then the remaining items have to do with security, and those recommendations are coming from ART. These recommendations are written from the consultants and LPA, but they are in conjunction with recommendations from the town of Shrewsbury and the people that work in the town of Shrewsbury, who feel that these are beneficial for maintenance, they're beneficial for ease of replacement. There also, a lot has to do with security, which is a huge item in the schools, as you guys all know. So the lock sets, the hardware controls, the access controls, and the telephone systems. These are standardized throughout the town in a lot of the buildings, and we do see a lot of towns moving like that. So we do find it, over time, there can be a cost savings for the way that these things are able to be maintained, how they're replaced, and just overall general use and functionality.
I really don't have much to add to that besides that, as much as it seems like they're coming from our consultants and directly from us, they're really on behalf of our programming and working directly with your representatives from all your different departments.
And one of the things we're looking for tonight is any questions from you guys, but also hopefully a recommendation to move this to an elected body. Unfortunately, the MSBA and state law requires that it goes to an elected body as opposed to the school building committee, which is a volunteer body. So school committee was the function of choice for LPA. I believe they've used them before on other projects. So I'll open it up to questions that anyone has. And
if you try to, for 1 second, think of how many items are spec'd in that huge document. We're only talking 10 items here.
Yes.
When I first got this, I was wondering where this was all going.
Yeah.
2 of them are basically hardware, plumbing, and the balance are all items that I would say are unique to the school system and the needs of each building. So they don't strike me as being out of the ordinary. Public buildings, you're comfortable with the 2 items that you have here? Okay. And then we will send this off to the school committee and ask for a public vote as required, because the overwhelming majority of the items here are, in my opinion, unique to the educational process, so it stands to reason that we go to the school committee. Any other questions or comments on that?
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
would just offer that with respect to these other items, classroom projectors, wireless hubs, computer distribution systems, security, access control, as was mentioned earlier, telephone system, these are all technology-related systems that are we use district-wide across all buildings, and for the purposes of being able to centrally manage them and have single contractors provide support. That's why we want to have integrated systems, same systems across our buildings for all of those right reasons. And this is something that our tech director has worked on closely with both the electrical engineering company and also LPA as well. So that's really, as they said, where a lot of this stuff sprang forth from. I guess I offered up this question before that, some of these things, I thought that the building committee itself would have the authority to do this, since the building committee is awarding a contract, awarding the contract. And so I guess the school committee in this case is not awarding a contract. I mean, so I guess I'm just questioning, is it really necessary to have that layer of vote? Is that going to affect the timeline at all?
Oh, I don't think so. We'll kick it to you this evening, and when's your next meeting of the school committee?
Tomorrow.
Okay, so
tomorrow,
you missed that one.
Yeah, the agenda was set last week, so that's my question, is how time sensitive is this?
Not time sensitive. We were gonna plan on putting it in with the 60% submission unless we were able to get it done tomorrow night. So we can go to the next school committee meeting. That's absolutely fine with us.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
And just so I'm clear, I know that there's the separate memo about the intrusion detection system, which it didn't make it into this, but I also noticed there's and maybe I missed this earlier, the ExacU video, that's also going to be added to the list there too.
That's correct.
Right.
These were as of when the submission went in February, after more meetings with the representatives from the school. Those 2 were in addition to this list that was in part of the DD submission.
And so my other question is there anything that anyone anticipates could be added to this at a later date, or do you feel this is going to be exhaustive at this point?
PMA is not aware of any.
We're not aware of any either. We do not anticipate it. Given that we are going to go to the school committee, we can obviously try to be sure before we would even bring that up on the next agenda and go forth with that, but at this point, no.
These recommendations are, if we hear from the town, we'll be sure to bring it to you guys as soon as we know about them, but we don't anticipate any.
Keith, do you have any others?
No, I do not.
Okay. You,
So
Mr.
just,
Simcoe?
yeah, just one question. So it's an MSBA requirement on top of,
It's a state,
It's a
Mass General Law
public
requirement.
procurement
Yeah.
so
requirement.
but you said the MSBA requires an elected body versus a governmental body?
MSBA requires it because it's a Mass General Law.
To me, it stands to reason, because, we're appointed, you're now limiting the scope for bids, so you could have a higher cost. So having a presentation before an elected body that believes that these are the appropriate steps, as you outlined, Patrick, it's a little belts and suspenders.
Yeah.
It is, frankly, I had a rather visceral reaction on Friday, I think it was, whenever you and I talked, Kevin. But it is what it is, so we have to do it.
Unfortunately, it is, and I can send you the link to proprietary specs if you want to see it. A lot of it's in my email. I kind of went word for word from it. But, yeah, elected body versus what they call ad hoc.
So, Mr. Chairman, so if it's, the next meeting of the school committee will be on Wednesday, the 27th of March. And so in terms of materials to the the school department office to myself and Mr. Collins, if that could be done by midday on Thursday the 21st.
321, you got it?
And if you could have, both the information that's here, but some kind of cover memo that in layperson's terms explains what this is about, so that, Mrs. Fritz, I'm sure will be happy to talk to the other members about kind of what it's about.
Okay.
And we
Absolutely.
can present it and as well as you folks to be able to answer.
Yeah,
any
we'll be
questions.
there for any questions.
Right.
Absolutely.
That would be great, thank you.
Beauty, any other questions? If not, can I have a motion to refer this to the school committee, excuse me?
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, unanimous. Item 6, review reconciled design development estimates and vote to authorize the submission to the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
So, as you know, we had the reconciliation meeting on Thursday last week with Fontaine, LPA, LPA's estimator, and PMA. Happy to report we're trending on budget. The supplemental submission, which is this piece right here, is going to include PMA's letter of recommendation. It's going to include the cost comparison chart, so that compares the LPA reconciled estimate to the SD reconciled estimate. It's going to include Fontaine's estimate. It's going to include all of the review comments from PMA, the commissioning agent, as well as Fontaine. I believe that's about close to 200 comments on that submission package on the drawings and specifications, so we do have eyes all over that package for LPA. Not that they don't. And then I will let Dave kind of speak to the estimate from Fontaine, and I can get into the numbers after. Oh, sorry, Sean.
One small thing, we had one other deliverable that was outlined to go into the supplement, the energy modeling analysis. Happy to report it's come out positive and well. As far as lead crediting goes, there's 16 possible points we could get for this energy modeling credit. We, as a prerequisite to the lead program through MSBA, you have to hit 11 of the 16. As of right now, our report is showing that we should be able to earn 14 of the 16 points, which would put us around about 37% over the baseline code for ASHRAE for energy cost-effective buildings. So we're trending very well in that respect too, for providing you with a very energy-efficient building.
What are the two items that appear to be out of reach? Or the 2 points?
You know, I had a feeling you'd ask. I don't have it right at my fingertips, the two that we're missing. I actually believe one of them has to do with the fact that we're not pursuing photovoltaics at this point,
Okay.
even though we're making the roof
Yep.
photovoltaic ready. And the last one I can get that for you. on
If
the
you could just
report
send it back through Kevin or
Yep.
Val, and they can distribute it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. So just kind of a brief update on the estimating process, and for those of you that haven't been involved in a project similar to this in the format before. So basically, we received from Lamro Pagano's office probably 4 weeks ago now the design development set of documents, which, as Sean said, is comprised of plans, specifications for all the disciplines. And the first thing that we do when we get that is go through it and see the quality of the documents, how well developed they are. For clarity, for scope, and happy to report that from the beginning, these documents were well developed at, or in many cases beyond the level that we would expect for a DD level of documents. So it made it in many cases easy for us to ascertain accurate quantities, to go through and determine level of finish in different areas. And then we, in our estimating process, go through and personally take off the quantity of everything from site work all the way through, the mechanical trades, every piece of the building. So then we develop in two formats, in CSI format and in UDA format, a detailed estimate. It's about 80 pages of backup detail that goes everything down to, if we were in this room, it would be the square footage of ceiling tiles, number of diffusers. Line by line, then input costs alongside those that are a combination of our histories, as well as keeping an eye on market costs, things that are bidding in the last several months. So that process results in us coming up with obviously one lump sum number for the estimate, which we reported at around right around 74.1 million, which is right in line with the budget that we're tracking on. We did all of that process in basically a bubble with Fontaine and our group of consultants and subcontractors. And at the same time, Lamro Pagano had their independent estimator doing the same work. So we basically, after each of us completed it independently, we share those numbers, and then we did an all-day reconciliation at Lamro Pagano's office, where at the end of the day, our reconciled number came to
74,109.
yeah, we were 74,107, I think, or 74,109.
Yep. 74,107, you're right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
And
And I'm not sure, I don't remember.
74,102
Yeah,
was
so,
LPA's.
so their estimator, came to within $10,000 of us, which frankly, that kind of a spread is not typical on a project this size. That's very, very close. But again, it's not really aiming for one another's numbers. It's going through each division and seeing where you stack up. So in our opinion, a very thorough process from both sides, that, thankfully has gotten us to a number that was what we were tracking for, that's within the budget, and will allow for us to, continue working towards, staying at or improving that number going forward as the design develops.
When you started that day, were there any great gaps that, as a result of
You know,
discussion, came together?
so we look at it in 25 or 30 different divisions, and we look at it in uniformat, which is more of an elemental classification, as well as CSI, which is by trade division. There were some decent sized gaps in the mechanical numbers, and how we looked at HVAC or electrical versus their estimator. But what we saw, which happens oftentimes in reconciliations, is I believe we're a little bit higher in HVAC and they were a little bit higher in electrical. And as we go through units, they kind of came towards each other. There was really nothing on this particular project that at the beginning of the day, or even when we saw their numbers unvetted, was a big red flag that seemed like we were looking at things completely differently.
As you look at the work you're doing at the balance of your business, and as you look at the cost assumptions here, are there any types of trends you're seeing that we should be concerned about, feeling better about, or anything along those lines?
I think that we've gotten a lot of feedback from subcontractors, material suppliers, folks that would like to be involved in this project, that they see this project as a very attractive project in the geography, the timeline, the type of work, the size, the scope of work. It's a large project that'll put a lot of folks to work for their businesses, but it's also not so large that it's going to create undue risk for any of, it's right in the wheelhouse for a lot of the good-sized commercial contractors, so that's good to hear. We continue to be cognizant of the effects of the trade stuff and the tariffs and all that on structural steel, on any kind of steel item that's imported or exported. We've seen the structural steel unit prices creep up a little bit in the last several months, which we've accounted for in here, but which has, it seems that that's actually come up in the last several months after, a year plus of rhetoric about it, and there's a little bit more momentum. There's actually a trade group that's kind of aggressively pursuing, trying to get, like they call it, a dumping tax on fabricated steel from coming. So if something like that geopolitically really was a big change, that's something that we need to be aware of and cognizant of. But there's definitely there's good momentum in the market, but we don't see it becoming so busy in the next 6 months that I think we're at a very good time.
Any other questions? Patrick?
Mr. Kane, I just want to ask a little bit more about, I'm not talking about specifically your estimate, but I was looking at the AM Fogarty estimate and the escalation. And so just in terms of a process and cost estimating in general, so you're doing your independent estimates and you're doing some comparison, and but you're also factoring in cost escalation between the present day and the expected bid date, which you have is the this coming winter of 2019, so sometime in November, December timeframe going out to bid. So how do you derive, this one shows 2.75% escalation. Can you just talk about how that 2.75% is applied to the entirety of the project across the board, Is there a particular industry index that you use? Did you have different escalation? How was that derived?
So the traditional escalation is looked at on a yearly basis, and it's generally ranges anywhere from 3% to 5% a year. I would say the last several years, we've generally carried and seen, you know, that it's accurate somewhere between 3 and 3.5% over the last several years. There's a couple different ways to look at it. Some people look at it as escalating it to the midpoint of construction, because that's, you know, kind of when the bulk of the money is being spent and things are being purchased. We tend to move our midpoint a little bit forward, because we're pretty proactive in purchasing and finalizing the subcontracts once we get the bids in. You know, we want to get the bids, we want to get the people that are interested at that time, get them under contract. You know, if we said it was going to be 3% and your midpoint of construction is certainly a little bit over a year from now, I think that it was a topic of discussion in the reconciliation, where we both started off a little bit higher than that 275. One of the reasons that we came down was, again, because we said we actually increased some of the units in some of the steel items. So that's, you know, within the team, right, we kind of knew amongst ourselves that we were accounting for a little bit of escalation in the market there. We also, you know, the way that this project's developed, we're planning on purchasing the site work, you know, this summer. We're planning on purchasing the concrete and the structural steel off the 90%. So we're really trying to move a lot of those big purchases up. But from a pure estimating textbook standpoint, you know, the prices that are in the unit cost should reflect today's prices, and your escalating contingency, which is, you know, applied on direct cost, should account for it. And I think that, you know, we recognize that the guys that are pricing it are always accounting for a little bit of escalation in their numbers. So I think that we're a little bit, you know, I don't want to say aggressive, but I think we just don't believe that it's going to be the full, you know, 4% that it would be by the book.
I'll add that MSBA requires us to carry escalation on these estimates through the midpoint of construction on the entirety of these, on the remaining submissions. Another thing I'll add is that, and I know we've worked with AM Fogarty a lot, they're constantly getting information back on all the bids that they've been working on. So as soon as they have finalized bids, they're inputting those to look at their own escalation numbers and see how they're matching up. There are industry standards that they use, Vermilion's, Vertex. I know they use Gilbane's report to get their information from. It's been accurate as we've seen.
Thank you.
Further questions? You just mentioned a rather aggressive approach to buying. Any risk to us with that approach, or why do you take that approach?
I don't think that there's risk. I think it mitigates risk. We want to get, you know, if someone...
Certainty?
Yeah, if someone offers, and it's kind of like what we're talking about with the 60% stage.
Yep.
You know, if we can lock in, you know, several $1 million of scope of work at a cost, someone that's attracted to at that time, and get on their books, and, you know, people always, we think, offer their best pricing when the work is kind of on the horizon, but real and immediately on the horizon. You know, so this project being funded and us kind of talking with the subs, I think will get us a lot of good interest.
Great.
It's a risk mitigator, absolutely.
One quick question. You mentioned two early packages, site demo, or demo and site.
So the plan is to bid the abatement and the demo,
Okay.
as well as what we call the site work, which will be basically, think of it as everything that's underground or attached to the ground.
Does it include Lake Street?
It will.
Okay, that was my point. Thank you.
So that was one of the important reasons for the decision at the last meeting.
Yes.
To be able to do that. That was
Okay.
going to allow that site package to go out.
Great. Next element of 6. Anybody else have anything to offer there?
I did look into this 2-point thing, and I misread my notes. We have the potential to earn 14 to 16, so the full value. So
Thank you.
I wanted to chase that through before we left.
No, thank you. Walter, anything else on 6, the reconciliation?
I don't have anything else at this time, do you
I
guys?
know there's got to be a vote to formally authorize the estimates, but then Frank's also got some updates on other kind of construction stuff with us getting ready to get going.
Yeah, just where we are, mentioned about the soil, been working with the town. Next week, we have a company coming out to spot some test pits.
Yep.
And then the following week, DPW and the consultants will come out and try to see what's happening with the soil to get a better feel if we can reuse some of that soil on site. That's currently what's happening, just kind of behind the scenes.
Yep. Anything else?
No?
Okay, then we need a vote to authorize the submission to the Massachusetts School Building Authority of the reconciled design development estimates. Further questions? Motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, we're unanimous. Item 7 is to set the next meeting date, which I have is April 9th, which at 6 PM, which I think works good with the school committee meeting. We can then wrap that up. Any highlights you care to mention this evening of the April meeting?
Be big at that meeting. We're gonna probably tighten up that schedule and really work with Fontaine and LPA to discuss moving that submission date for the MSBA to include the Fontaine's hard numbers for the site. So we should have a finalized schedule, so maybe some tweaks to the schedule would be
Okay.
on that.
Great.
We could probably report back on MSBA comments on the DD package.
Great.
We should have those by then, so those will probably be 2 big items.
Anything else from you guys?
They get
Nope. That's great. Anything else from the committee? No? All right, then I'll accept the motion to adjourn. Motion's been made and seconded. Do we have a second?
Second.
To adjourn, all those in favor, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, we're adjourned. Thank you, guys, very much.
Maybe they'll have them, maybe